Is doing good good business? It's the Limitless Leadership Lounge, another tri-generational conversation for you, the emerging leader. I'm John Gehring, joined today, as always, by Coach Jim Johnson and Dr. Anuma Kareem. And we're talking about stewardship, doing good in business. We're going to talk about that along with some succession-related topics and, of course, other leadership topics that you, the young and emerging leader, can take away, whether you're an entrepreneur or a leader within the company. Today, we're really excited to welcome David Grau Sr. to the program. He joins us from Lexington, Kentucky, on his horse farm out there, where he spends a lot of his time now. But David, don't let his Kentucky roots fool you right now, because he has been all over the world. He's also an award-winning author. His main book, or at least the book that I've read so far, The Stewardship Advantage, is phenomenal. That is one that describes all about his ideas of stewardship and making the world a better place through business. He's also written four other books, along with being honored with the 2025 Bronze Medal for Strategic Business Planning from the Global Book Awards. So David has accomplished a lot as a leader and an author. David, thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to the Limitless Leadership Lounge.
A pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Let's start with the stewardship advantage. And in a word, for people who don't really understand what stewardship really means, we might think, well, it's all about doing good, right? It's all about feeding the homeless and donating to the dog shelter and doing all those wonderful things. Maybe that's not right for my business, but it's good for all those people who are doing that in their businesses. What does stewardship mean for the everyday average business owner?
Well, and that's the perfect way to ask the question. So, stewardship can be many things to many people, but I wrote a book for the small business owner anywhere in the world. And so let's start there. Small business to me is usually anywhere from 1 to 100 people. And after that, you could be doing anything: a doctor, dentist, a lawyer, an accountant. You could be running a food cart in Bangladesh. It doesn't matter. If you run a small business and basically you're the boss, then you have some choices to make. So, what I suggested in my book was that one of those choices would be to use your small business, particularly in your community, to do good and to be great. So, a lot of small business owners say, I feel like I am a good person already. I help people when I can and I do what's right. But my book goes further than that. And it says, thank you for all the good things you do and for the good person you are. But would you please consider operationalizing stewardship and making it a documented part of your business? Where that starts is a stewardship plan. It could be 1 or 2 pages, could be 15 or 20 if you want it to be. But the stewardship plan lays out how your business will be used. And so a small business has about 7 or 8 stakeholders: your employees, any partners, the business entity itself, your customers, your community, the environment, your suppliers. And so in the stewardship plan, what you do, just I'll finish this in 60 seconds. You lay out your, in writing, mission, vision, values, and then one stakeholder group at a time, you say, okay, here's what I stand for, and here's what I want to do better and right. And I'm going to take each stakeholder group, maybe one per year, and I'm going to help them become better by doing certain things. And in exchange for that, I'll trust that you'll make me better. And so, the mantra of the book is making the world a better place, one community at a time.
Hey, David, I have to jump in
Wonderful.
because you mentioned a word, and it's interesting because I do a lot of leadership and team culture presentations around the country. And when we recorded, I just got back, and it's interesting. I talked to a group, a company, mid-level managers, and I'm big on my own, having my own personal mission statement. I saw that you had your mission on your website, so I'm just curious because I asked the room how many had a personal mission statement in writing, and there was one person.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and it's pretty much, it's a very low percentage when I talk to, different various groups. I'm just curious, how did you discover your mission, and what would be your advice in helping a leader get clarity, because I think if you can't lead yourself, it's hard to lead others. So I'm really encourage people to discover their mission. I'm just curious, how did you discover yours, and what advice would you give a leader?
Yeah, good question. And well spoken. That's exactly how a coach should look at the world, right? If you don't know where you're going, how can you expect anyone to follow you? And so that's what I say in my book, and that's chapter one. But I, you know, I used to be a consultant for a lot of bigger, larger companies in the financial services industry, and I noticed that the larger the business, the more likely it was that they would write down their mission, vision, and values. That became important. And certainly by the time you had an official HR department, you usually had a mission, vision, value statement. But you're absolutely right. The small business owners, in let's say, the 2 to 20 person range, they just don't tend to get around to that. And so one night I was sitting there watching the news up kind of late, and it was pretty depressing. And I thought, I was trying to, what I do with my next book. And I thought, maybe this is time to help kind of mobilize and operationalize 500 million small business owners around the world. And my wife said, like, where would you even start? And I said, that's a good question. Where would you start? And so I went on a long, long walk and I thought about that. And I thought, well, I'm a writer. I put things in writing. I'm an English major, from way back when. So you don't start by writing a book, and you don't start by writing a stewardship plan. You start by figuring out who you are, where you're going. And to put that in writing, that's your mission, vision, value statement, which, by the way, in closing out that thought, that's like 25 words. But it's not a page. It doesn't take a year. Sit down and write it out, and that's what I did. And the mission statement that you see on my website, Coach, is about the 15th draft. So as I learn and as I experience and as I succeed and as I fail, I go back and I tweak it a little bit. It's your statement. You can do anything you want with it, but put it in writing and share it. If you don't tell the world what you stand for, they'll tell you.
Mhm.
And that's not always a good thing.
Mhm. Very
Yeah,
true.
you're so right, David. And it is so important for us to have a direction, just like the GPS, putting the direction, the address there, and then we are going towards it. My question is relevant to this new era we are living in. Uh, 30 years ago, we were always listening that small businesses are being eaten up by big businesses like Walmart, Macy's, Burns and Nobles, all those companies. But with the emergence of Amazon delivery system, TikTok, social media, and all those things, we could see this booming of small businesses, not only in America, but also in Bangladesh. Now, my sister has a business of
Yeah.
gifting business. There are like every household is doing some kind of business. So a big boom of entrepreneurs are being created. So what is your like? Do you think that this will sustain, or what will happen to big business? Will they? How can they sustain in this environment? And what will happen to the small businesses? What is
Well,
your take?
yeah, thank you for that. And by the way, to the listening audience, you got to give this whole crew credit. They didn't telegraph any of the questions ahead of time, so I got to figure these out as we go. And that's the best way to
Yeah,
do an
Got to
interview.
give you credit too,
Yeah.
on the spot.
yes, it's
So
your credit.
here's the best answer I think I could give you. Um, Big businesses, I'll probably use the wrong example, but Sears Roebuck, J.C. Penney, they were around when
Mm,
I was a kid, and we couldn't wait for the Christmas toy catalogs to come in the mail. They're going to be around forever, right? Well, nobody's around forever. So I think the benefit of the small business owner, while it's harder for them to last 100 years for sure, there are 500 million of them around the world. And I mean, I think they prevail in sheer numbers. I talked earlier about, how do you take a small business and help make your, world better one community at a time? Well, every community's got hundreds, if not thousands of small businesses already located there that if they knew how to operationalize what they were doing, those small businesses, it's like mobilizing an army. I'm not sure a military comparison is the right way to go, but that's how to do it. And then second to that, I wrote kind of a trilogy, and my other books are about building a business that lasts for more than one generation. So as part of being a good steward to your clients and to your clients' children and grandchildren, and same to your suppliers, to your community, to your key employees, building a business that has a second generation lined up for ownership, it doesn't always work. But if you give it the opportunity and you hire next generation talent with the idea that if you come to work every day and you buy into our company's mission, vision, and values, and you stay put and you grow, and I'll help you grow as the owner. I'll help you with your education. After you work here for 4 or 5 years, I'll help you with your student loans, whatever it makes sense for you. Then you do give that business, that small business that with one owner at the start, you give it the opportunity to become a bigger small business that could be around 30 or 40 years from now. And maybe one day
Right.
it sells off to a big business. That's not wrong.
Mm.
But in the meantime, boy, it can do an awful lot of good for an awful lot of people.
Yeah.
So
So,
true.
David, you mentioned throughout the book a lot that doing good is good business. And you could read the book and you got to read the book, okay, The Stewardship Advantage, and check out like exactly why that is. But I feel like at face value, a lot of people feel skeptical about that because it's either or. It's either or, right? You either spend a morning at the soup kitchen volunteering or you spend the morning doing business development and helping your business. How is it that doing good in the community, whatever that looks like, can also be beneficial for your bottom line?
Sure. There's an analogy I used early in the book about getting your house in order. So before you go out to change the world and spend your weekends volunteering at the soup kitchen, you need to make sure your own business is ready to take on the world and to solve these problems, and then to attract the talent that will help propel you and take care of your clients and your suppliers and your community. So first things first, before you do good for the world, do good for yourself. Build a business. What does that mean? Well, it probably means setting up in most countries and under most business laws an entity. So this entity can share ownership when that time comes. That entity will have formalized procedures, documentation, charter, bylaws. It'll have a profit and loss statement. It'll have a balance sheet. And nobody gets this stuff right the first time. I didn't in my 30s, but that's where you start to learn, right? You start to do, and then people help you through the mistakes, and you get better and better at it. You get your house in order, and then you start to attract the talent, and you attract better and stronger clientele. You figure out which suppliers are good and which ones aren't, and then you figure out what's important to you and your business, and you take the time to write it down, mission, vision, and values, and then you create a stewardship plan, and now you have a direction. You're not just trying to solve all the world's problems. You're trying to solve the ones that matter to you in your community with the talent that you're amassing, whether that's 2 people or 20. Um, I think that's the answer to the question. Doing good is good, but it's not trying hard, and it's not volunteering your time or giving away to charity. That comes later. Get your house in order, and then take care of your house to make your community better.
So David, you talked about, like building a business and, so we try to help young and emerging leaders with this podcast. So whether it's a young leader that's in, a fairly big business that's taking over, or this entrepreneur that wants to scale his or her business, to do that, they're going to have to bring in team members.
Yes.
So I'm curious, what are your thoughts? Because you talked some about mission and values, which I'm big on as well. What advice would you give to that leader, whether he or she is trying to build a business or they're just taking over a situation where they have to build this team? What would your advice be on getting the right people, as Jim Collins says, on your bus? So,
Well, I think the starting point is you need to know what you stand for. Get your house in order. Write down your mission, vision, and values. And when someone comes in the door that wants to work for you, or you make the approach to someone, tell them who you are and what you stand for. Tell them what you intend to do with this business over the next 10 years. Is that the right person that you're sitting across from to help you do that? Um, Maybe, maybe not. But if you don't know where you're going and you haven't taken the time to memorialize it, you'll hire the first, bright face that walks in the door, and it's probably the wrong person. It's okay for the short term, but for the long term, you've got to have a clear direction. And also, just as a second part to the answer, yesterday I did a YouTube video. I say that like this is old hat. 9 weeks ago, I've never made a YouTube video in my life, but I made a video called, Are you building an ego-centric business or an equity-centric business? So egocentric, of course, is the sole proprietor who says, nobody can do this better than me. And therefore, I have to do just about everything, solve every problem, make every donut, open the doors, pay the bills, do the books, because nobody can do it like I can. Nobody has the heart and passion I do. That's a really good way to run a one-person business that dies with you. So an equity-centric business says, let's get your house in order and set up a business where you bring in talent that somebody's better at doing the books than you are. Somebody's better at paying the bills. Somebody's better at waiting on customers. Someone's better at HR. And I learned that the hard way myself. I got a law degree, so I thought I could, do everything better. I don't remember a single marketing or business class in law school. So little by little, I started replacing myself with an expert in marketing who actually had a degree in marketing, and then someone in sales, and then someone in HR. And those people had passions for what they did. And they were all better at those things because that's what they love to do. And so little by little, I had to make the shift from egocentric to equity-centric. Best thing that ever happened to me. And by the way, to close out that story, 65 employees later, I retired using my own succession plan. And that's what I wrote about.
wow.
Wonderful. And when we are talking about stewardship, another thing many businesses are also encouraged to focus on is environmental stewardship. In our part of the world, we are observing Bangladesh is one of those countries due to climate change. In 30 years, 27% of our land is going to go underwater, and the temperature, we could see those brick lines of burning bricks. You can see all those the industries polluting water, and many countries and the many businesses are doing that. But what is your take? Sometimes businesses says that it's profit over everything. Because if we are using environmental friendly products and all these things, maintaining the environmental regulation, our cost of production goes up. So we cannot employ our people. We cannot take care of our people. So if you are in this kind of scenario, what advice would you give to the businesses, like taking the ethical standard, stewardship of people, stewardship of environment? Can we do both? So, what are your thoughts?
And the short answer to that question is yes, you can do both. And in fact, in the very in part one of my book, The Stewardship Advantage, I take pains right out of the gate to say this is not about a choice. You cannot ask a small business owner to not be profitable and make money in order to
Mm,
save the world. They can't do it. They won't last. They've got to be a moneymaker. They've got to be profitable. I don't think purpose and profit are at odds. I think if you write down your mission, vision, and values and you properly operationalize your small business, you can do both and you can do both well.
Mhm.
By the way, one of the stakeholders, and I list these out for most small businesses in my book, one of those stakeholders is the environment. So I use an example of here in the U.S., Patagonia, and Yves Renard, who literally, kind of um, took the climate under his own arm and said, I'm going to show the world how to do this right. So that's a valuable, super profitable
Mm.
company. I mean, we're talking in the billions here. They're not small businesses anymore. But
Right.
he went after the environment and just said, my business and me as the leader, we're going to stand for a cleaner, happier, healthier world that we live in. And this is how we're going to do it. And if you work here, we're going to build a business. We're going to have buildings. We're going to have good people. We're going to have large teams, and we're going to sell a lot of clothes around the world. But we're not going to make a profit at the cost of the environment. So we're going to show you how to do both. And I laid out a fair amount of information about that and how they did it. But his primary stakeholder was the environment. In my book, what I say is, listen, let's start with purpose and profit working together. And then
Mm.
let's take care of all of your stakeholders, starting with, if you like, the environment in your community. You might want to work on the other side of the world later when you have more time. Right now, just start local. And
Right.
if you share this message with the small business owner to the right of you and to the left of you, and they do the same, pretty soon we've got a small, legion in every little city working to make the community and the environment a better place. And they still have to make a profit, but I firmly believe if you're focused on doing something good for the environment and you write it down and you build it into your mission and your whole team is working on it with you, you can make a difference.
Mm.
Right.
Right.
David Grau, he's the author of 5 books, including The Stewardship Advantage. Here is all about building a profitable and principled small business. And then also he has other books, and David, this is what I'd love to dive into next is your work in succession. Because that's something that a lot of us, especially me, like just starting out right in business for the past few years, I'm not thinking about a business that outlives me. I mean, I'm not thinking about retiring or worse, dying. That's
Yeah.
way too far away, right? So give our young audience, our young and emerging leaders, some tips on how to begin with the end in mind, as the great Dr. Covey says, right? Begin your business with the idea that someday you're not going to be around to continue it.
Well, the whole idea of building with the end in mind, and I think the first line in the book is, so how does your story end? You're never too young to know the answer to that question. Do you want to build something and sell it off when you're 50 years old and go do something else? Do you want to build a business that's with you for your entire life and then pass it down to your children and grandchildren? Do you want to maximize value, sell to the highest bidder as fast as you can? There's no wrong answer. But if you don't know where you're going, how are you going to get there? So building with the end in mind says on day one, it's probably not about retirement. In your 30s, I didn't care about that. But I did care about, I did want to build a business that had 65 employees. I did want to build a business that I could pass down and sell my interest in to the people I hired and trained. And one day they kind of trained me. But
Mhm.
those were my goals. And I adjusted those goals over time, but I knew what they were. I built with the end in mind, and I just never lost sight of that. And I think that's the best advice I can have is before you start your business, know where you want to go with it. And you could change your mind.
Well, you talk about building a business of durability, David. So, and to do that, I when doing some research on you and just my knowledge of, building a program and building businesses, you need to develop some types of systems. What advice would you give a leader on building, give us maybe one or two examples of systems you really believe you need to have a successful business that will be durable?
Oh, great. And so in the Stewardship Advantage, the book is divided up into three parts. So part one is just helping people understand what is stewardship. And and I explain, it's not really a religious or a political context. This is small business operations. It is mechanical. Part two are the mechanics. In fact, the whole middle part of the book, 1/3 of it, are devoted, Coach, to the systems and processes that support your purpose. I mean, set up an entity. I mean, I am mechanical by nature. I went to Purdue, and so I'm an English major from Purdue. But I literally said, how many shares of stock should you have? How many classes of stock? What should you own? When do you sell it? How do you value it? If somebody, John's age wants to buy, 10% of the business, Coach, from you, where's he get the money? How long is that going to take? What if it fails? Well, what if it succeeds and he wants to buy another 50% of that business? How do you document it? Specifically, what documents do you need? I laid it all out in detail. And so, some of the book reviews that came back said, wow, opened up part one and I felt empowered and emboldened and I was all over the stewardship thing. And then I got to part two and my head got kind of lost in the bucket of bolts because, it's hard. Systems and processes are hard, but you can't build a business without them. And then bringing it to a close, part three kind of wraps it all up and says, okay, now you know why, and now you know how. Let's talk about what you're going to do and the documentation and operationalizing of this process. And I literally provide sample stewardship plans to the reader to say, okay, this is where it all goes. And this is how you build a business that lasts beyond you, if you want that, or business that changes the world for the better, if you want that.
Yeah.
I'm all about systems and processes. You just can't survive without it. And
Right.
Dr.
Right.
Karam, that might be the other answer to your question. Purpose versus profit.
Mm,
Yeah, if you do it right
correct.
and you build it well. But if I may just circle back to like the wheels are turning, and I obviously hadn't pre-prepared these answers, but I was going to finish answering the question you asked. Um, can purpose and profit really coexist? What about all those big businesses out there? As I sat there and I watched that news story, that kind of prompted me to write the Stewardship Advantage. I looked at all those big businesses out there, and they're not making the world a better place, in my opinion. They have one primary stakeholder group to serve, and that's their stakeholders. So one of my YouTube videos was simply stated, if not us, meaning the small business owner, then who? Um,
Right.
we want the governments to fix it, but the climate and crime and poverty and homelessness don't seem to be getting much better. Why
Mm,
not deploy, the hardest working, the most ambitious, the strongest work ethics I've ever seen in my life, the intrepid small business owner in every community. If not them, then who? It's got to be
so
them.
true. Beautifully said, David. And along that line, I was wondering, there in business we talk about shareholders, then we talk about stakeholders. And as you have mentioned, many big businesses, they are focusing on immediately making the shareholders happy. And that is why they are doing so many things which can harm them in the long term. And
Yes.
there are so many case stories as well. And even there was one, I think Ford or some businesses where they were focusing on short term profit and making the shareholders happy. And even Boeing, the previous management, they were focusing on like, okay, in low cost, they're compromising ethical standard and all these things to raise the profit so the stakeholders are happy. But in the long term, it just crashed. Everything just came at them. So, what would be like some of your advices to when you're doing a business? How do you balance this stakeholders and shareholders? Uh, are there any balancing act, or are there like who is important, more important, shareholders or stakeholders?
Yeah, no, there's the $64,000 question. So, and I think the answer is it depends on you as a small business owner. And again, your mission, vision, and values. What do you
Right.
stand for? How do you want your story to end? Um,
Mm.
what will you say to your grandchildren when it's time to retire and you look back on your career? Did you build something that you're proud of? So let's say that you decide in your business, in your community, with your mission, vision, and values, you've got 6 or 7 key stakeholders. Start with your employees. That's a stakeholder group. Your partners, your business itself, which can outlive the founder, and then your community, your clients, your suppliers, and the environment. There's 7. Now let's prioritize them. The idea would not be you could treat them all equally, but I don't think that's practical. So, what's the most important to you as a small business owner?
Mm.
Well, for instance, if your goal is to build a business that you can hand off to the next generation, then you need to get your house in order, set up a business structure designed to do that. It's not that hard. That's part 2 of my book. But then you need to get the talent in the door and hold on to them. Now that you've got cash flowing and you take good care of your staff, they'll help you take great care of your clients. That should help you grow the business. As you grow the business, you'll find better suppliers and better partners, and you can start to help the community and the environment. And in turn, these things come back and help you. When you help your stakeholders be better, they'll help you be better. But you don't have to do it
Right.
equally, and you don't have to take them all on at once. But you do have to write it down. In other words, you need a plan. And that stewardship plan again, if you want, write to me on my website. I'll help you come up with a good stewardship plan. Start with 1 or 2 groups and lay out, a paragraph or 2 on each. This is what I'm going to work on in the next 5 years. I want to do these things better for these key stakeholders. And then once a year, sit down with your key stakeholders, including some of your larger or better clients, your longer term clients, and say, am I doing this right? Are we taking good care of you? When I grew up, I was always told customer service meant the customer's always right. And I said, even when they're wrong? And the boss, was going to grab me and shake me by the shoulders. No, they're not wrong. They're the client. Well, today's generation, they don't even want to talk to you. Just tell it to the app. So, talk to your key stakeholders. Let them tell you, am I doing this right? Am I helping you? And then take the opportunity to tell them how you want them to help you run the business better. Make it work for everybody. That's my point.
Yeah, and you said it so nicely that, and we often talk about these things in our podcast also, like how we need to align our belief, our values, our interests with our philosophy of work. So when everything is aligned, we are also in a good mood, and if we are in a good mood, our business could be in a good mood too. But that alignment of our own values, our belief with the business. So whatever we are doing, it there should be an alignment to exist.
And I'd be the first to admit, we don't live in a perfect world, and you're never going to find perfect alignment and eternal happiness with all of your stakeholders.
That's
But
true.
that's why write it down and weigh back in on it on a regular basis and communicate and talk. But most importantly, listen. What can you do better? You can always do something better, and your plan will change as you go. How your story ends might change. Write it down, share the story, and then do a lot of listening and keep making adjustments. Um, who, if not us, who? If not that way, what is the better way? I haven't found it.
Right.
Yeah. I gotta ask, it's you're a small business owner, say, and you're thinking, well, this stewardship thing sounds great. And David's saying to make a stewardship plan, write it down. Where do I start? Because I'm thinking I'm passionate about so many things. So I want to feed the homeless. I want to help the environment. I want to spread positive messaging with the world. I also want to help cancer patients. I want to help raise money for cancer and like so many more things. There are so many passions and causes that are near and dear to my heart and any small business owner's heart that we want to help them all. But you're saying start local and and start with what you can do. how do you sift through all the things that you want to do to help the world and find the one that you can start with and use as a launching pad?
So, again, I think you have to figure out what's important to you. I mean, obviously, none of us, I don't think, start a small business with the idea that mission number one is change the world. No, you got to get the business launched, and you got to start making money by taking care of your customers. You got to open the doors in the morning and turn the lights on, and you got to meet payroll. But along the way, and sooner than later, I would say, um, align yourself not just with your own stakeholders, but align yourself with similarly minded small business owners in your community who
Mm,
share the same work ethic, the same passion, and similar mission, vision, and values, and talk to
right.
them. I love the context of a study group, and I write about that in my book. And I said, just make sure that in your study group, you're not the biggest business and the smartest person. Get in a group where you can learn from everybody else. Talk to them, and maybe you're going to find 8 to 10 other small businesses, each with 5 to 10 people in them, who all want to go and donate money to the local children's cancer center, or to the homeless shelters, or to the environment, or whatever that your shared passion is. Multiply it. That's the joy and power of a small business, right? You are never alone, even when you think you are.
That's
Join
excellent.
forces
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
good
and
answer.
spread the word and teach,
Yeah.
learn, teach, listen. You're just never alone between your stakeholders and your shareholders and your neighbors. Um, you got an army out there.
Yeah, just reach out, right? And part of the beauty of conversations like these is exactly that, is that that's what we're talking about here. We're demystifying that. We think we're alone, but when we get in conversation with people like yourself and other great business owners and leaders, we're reminded that we're not alone.
And by the way, just for the small business owners who will be listening to this, um, Dr. Krim, I think people often come back to, I got to pick one. I got to pick purpose, or I got to pick profit, and be part one. Just part one. If you don't like it, it makes a dandy coaster.
Yeah.
But the idea is, you not only can have purpose and profit, you'll be a better business. You'll be a better person. You'll attract better clientele. You'll attract better talent. And then, again, when you get all done with this thing and you look back in your career, um, I, it would mean everything. I think if you could sit down and say, okay, I didn't build a business that went public. I didn't build $1 billion business. I'm not Patagonia, but I'm proud of what I
Mm,
did. And
right.
tell that story to your grandchildren. Tell that story to the grandchildren of your first client. That's the kind of stuff my book is about. I don't think you're going to be a billionaire by implementing stewardship, but I don't think that's how we save or serve the world best,
True.
That's a great
True.
point.
So
in
true.
my opinion.
David, I uh, for my final question, and first of all, I'd like to thank you for your wonderful insights today. I know our audience will grab some real valuable nuggets that you shared. But is that okay? You've written 5 books, so this is a two-part question because I'm an avid reader myself.
Okay.
Is if you were to advise a young leader, tell us the book you would recommend of the 5 you've written to read first, and also then just we have to go outside your books of 5. And what would be one book you would recommend to a young and emerging leader that you would recommend they read early in their career?
Um, I'll tackle those in reverse order. Help me remember. And so, throughout my book, The Stewardship Advantage, one of the things I wanted to do was to write a book to the world. There aren't 500 million or half a billion small business owners in the US alone. We're talking the world. And so I included stories from all over the world. And I included some of my favorite short one-liner quotes. And, and my favorite quotes and my favorite lessons learned about business, this might come across as surprising. Did I mention I'm an English lit major? I love Charles Dickens. I love his stories and the hardships that life presented, back in the 1860s and 1850s, and his observation of inequity. I didn't say inequality because, again, that might be somebody's goal, but that's just not the world we live in. But the ability to have more means, I think, and I think Mr. Dickens would agree that more is expected of you. And small business owners, it's not that they're richer, it's that their superpowers are usually work ethic, they are intrepid, they are unafraid, and they're adaptable. And that's why they're the answer to the world's problems, I believe. So a little bit of history. Go back and read Charles Dickens. I
Mm,
loved his works. I don't think you could pick out a wrong one. That's that answer.
right.
Um, in terms of the 5 books that I wrote, so a number of my books are about building a business that lasts. The black book, the white book, I call them, building with the end in mind and, acquiring your future. But before you build a business that lasts, what do you stand for? And I did a video on it kind of went viral, and I talked about a story where I walked in for my first job interview as a 21-year-old, and I, this crotchety old boss, right out of a Charles Dickens story, um, looks up at me from behind his desk and he says, "Why are you here?" And I checked my watch. It was the right time, the right office. And I thought, well, he knows why I'm here. I'm here for a job interview. You don't get it. Why are you here? And, I just, at that age, I just wanted to turn around and go out home again and go back to school. But I got it. That was the question. Why are you here? And so the book that is designed to help you answer that question is The Stewardship Advantage. Before you build a business and read my black book and white book and build something that lasts beyond you, why? Well, how does your story end? Who do you want to help along the way? What would make you proud? I think you got to discover that first before you put all the rest of the mechanics in place. Charles Dickens first. This is a great time of year to read Dickens. Second, The Stewardship Advantage.
Well said. Renew any
I love
final.
that question. We could talk all day on that
I
question.
know.
Yeah. My final question is we were talking about stakeholders, shareholders, so many things. But how important is the owner's well-being, the stewardship, like taking care of myself, if my health is okay or not, uh, for that business growth? So your perception and some advice on that. Like, why should a small business owner or anyone who is in that leadership position should be taking care of themselves first um, to grow their business?
Yep, and I well said. I couldn't agree more. So, a stewardship, it's important, and I would urge every small business to better understand it. It's not about you being a good person or a bad person. That's not stewardship. But learn about stewardship, and then before you take on any other stakeholders, focus on getting your house in order. And I literally put that right up front in part one, because if you don't get your house in order, I'm an unabashed optimist, as you can probably tell. But I also have a section in part one that says, 500 million of you around the planet. But here's the cold, hard business truth. Most of you won't last 5 years because you don't have the systems and processes prepared. You don't get your house in order. And John, to your point, they want to do too much with the business too soon. And before they're really even profitable, they want to go donate their time on Fridays, to somebody else. Get your house in order and get that machine running properly first, and then make it better. How do you make it better? Make all your stakeholders better. They'll make you better. They will.
And are there things that you do, David, too, or you did early on that set you up for success when it comes to taking care of yourself, even personally, even physically? How important is that too?
I I wear my Fitbit every day, and I walk on this 10-acre parcel. 14,000 steps per day.
Wow.
But it's not the exercise, it's the quiet. When I'm out there, that I don't have this camera and mic and the computer with me. I usually don't take my phone with me, and we've got about a mile and a half of what they call here in horse country, black four plank horse fencing. I'm new at this, and it's fun. I feel like John Wayne. I'm not a horse rider. I just write the checks.
Mhm.
My wife's the equestrian.
Yeah.
Um, but it's fun to walk the fence line every day, especially in 6 inch high Kentucky bluegrass. It's a workout.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
so, but that's my time to think. And a lot of my videos, I say, I went for a walk last night. I went for a walk and I had this idea. That's where my ideas come from. They don't come from this.
Mm.
I
Yeah.
don't mean you. I mean, sitting in front of a computer surfing and being on an app. That kills my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, we
Right.
need more of that as leaders, and we need more stewardship too. And first of all, really defining, getting clear on what stewardship is, because there's a lot of misconceptions that you talk about in the book, and what it means to you as a business owner. So, David Grau Sr., you can find him. David, well, why don't you tell us what's the best way to connect with you, find your books, find more information?
So I had a wonderful lady in Canada build me an author's website. I always wanted one of those. You know, Charles Dickens would have one if he lived in our time.
Right.
My author's
Yeah.
my author's website is www.davidgrau, Grausr, and is in senior.com. And you can read about my books, any new projects that I come up with. I've got a blog post up there. And if you want to reach out and just say hi, I have a free 30-minute consultation system. Very nice lady yesterday from the United Kingdom wrote in and just said how moved she was, and she had a small business and wanted to implement some of the ideas. I've had people from Poland, from Bangladesh, from
Wow.
Richmond, Kentucky. It's kind of fun just to have
Yeah.
people stop by and say hello. So please do that. I would love it.
Yep.
DavidGrauSenior.com. Links down in the show notes, and for all the books too up on Amazon. But he suggests, and I suggest too, that you start with the Stewardship Advantage. David, thank you so much for your time today. Everything you talked about, stewardship, succession, and more. We can't thank you enough. We look forward to staying in touch and continuing to follow your work.
Thanks for having me, everybody.